David Wheelan ran a tight ship at the DW Stadium. For the 20 years he was in charge of Wigan Athletic, the club moved up from the lower echelons of English football to the Premier League, while Bournemouth, Leeds United and Portsmouth suffered the ignominy of administration. The club continued to punch above their weight. Even after Wheelan left his chairman's position and nominated his grandson, David Sharpe, the club continued in earnest. With the little funds they had, they managed brilliantly. There was checked extravagance, their means always justified their expenditures. With the brilliance of their former players, Wigan Athletic managed under the Wheelan family what any Latics fan had never dreamed. In the 2013-14 season, they would end their stint in the Premier League, but former player and then coach Roberto Martinez would ensure FA Cup glory. The finances would take a hit from not being in the Premier League, but Europa League participation was ensured in the most remarkable fashion. The club would succumb to yet another relegation, but only a season was spent in League One. Wigan would bounce back. Sharpe allowed them to keep a pulse on their financial well-being and keep pace with the competition. A return to the Premier League in their current situation was not on the cards, and the decision to sell their stake in the Latics was agreed. No one would have thought that Wigan Athletic, run by the Wheelan family with careful projections, would go into administration just a year after they relinquished control. It's an interesting story, one that shows the demerits of selling to foreign owners, and how the English Football League EFL does not have any safeguards in protecting its clubs. But before we dive into that criticism, let's take a look at the club prior to administration. The Wheelan family sold their rights to the club, the stadium and training facilities in a £22 million deal. The Hong Kong-based International Entertainment Corporation, IEC, would be the new owners of Wigan Athletic. The new owners injected money into the club and it paid dividends. In the year before, Wigan spent £4.54 million on players, which was offset by player sales of £6.03 million. In the current campaign, they managed to keep their best players while reinforcing the roster with talents worth £7.13 million. The Latics had fought relegation, and with reinforcements that were not dictated by player sales, they were comfortably in the mid-table slots. Wigan were on the upturn with shrewd investments, and it was evident in their performances. Then, the current situation happened. The club hails from a small city and doesn't have a lot of commercial avenues to tap into. The IEC felt the burden of their investment and sought out other investors. They would find them from their nook of the world. At the start of June, it was revealed that Hong Kong-based Next Leader Fund has secured a majority stake in Wigan. Wigan's official website would state the announcement: "We can confirm that the sale of the majority shareholdings of the Wigan Athletic Group from International Entertainment Corporation IEC to Next Leader Fund LP has now formally completed. The transaction has been formally ratified and approved by the shareholders of the IEC, the Hong Kong Stock Exchange and the EFL." There would be a major shuffle in the board of directors. Directors Kevin Roberts, Dr. Michelle Chen, Chi Wai Lee, Wing Lam Leung, Cheung Tat Man would step down, while Oh Yeung, Man Chun Sheto and Chun Kit Chan would join the current ranks. On paper, the takeover did not show any signs of going south. The EFL had done their due diligence, while the approval from the shareholders of IEC and the Hong Kong Stock Exchange showed that the Next Leader Fund could be relied upon. That would not be the case a month later. Wigan were on an 8-match unbeaten run, but there were rumours regarding the liquidity of the club. The dreaded news of administration would be announced on July 7th. It was announced that the Latics had become the first casualty of the current pandemic. Next Leader Fund were going to renege on their promises to fund the club. The financial impact of the lockdown was rearing its ugly head. But how could we arrive at this situation in a month? Why is the Next Leader Fund failing to follow up on its promises so soon? How could the EFL allow the deal to continue? What had they done in their due diligence that Wigan were forced into administration a month later? These and other questions pop up when you consider the timing of the Latics going into administration. The answers to these show the dire problems of ownership culture which impact the fans in the end. Before we dive further into the issue, we should look into how the EFL ratifies a takeover approach. Any deal like this appears on the EFL's desk and they have a simple task: ensure that the new owners will be able to provide the funds that they are pledging. They just have to prove that they have the funds to assist in paying debts and not put up anything. This is in stark contrast to UEFA's financial fair play rules that govern clubs playing in UEFA competitions. Club owners have to conclude voluntary agreements where they commit funds in advance. For Championship clubs, ensuring such commitment is a tough task, and consortium takeovers have proven to be fickle. Charlton Athletic's takeover faced similar hurdles. Matt Southall assumed the chairman's role after the consortium paid just £1. There was an obligation to buy the stadium and training ground for £50 million over the next 5 years. Even before the deal was ratified by the EFL, the new owners were looking to cash in on their miserly purchase. Southall's partners were asking for £2 million to get out of the deal, a mammoth profit on their £1 outlay. Charlton and Wigan's example shows that EFL's due diligence counts for nothing. Their ratification has value, but their measures in place do not help the club in any significant way. Whereas if voluntary commitment of funds was put into action, akin to what UEFA asks of its partner clubs, such situations could be avoided. The Next Leader Fund and their directors should be held accountable after 50% of the non-playing staff lost their jobs after the administrators took over. The administrators cannot be put at fault, as their sole task is to ensure the continuity of the club. They're doing the job that's tasked to them and ensure that Paul Cook continues the good work he's done throughout the 2019-20 season. Cook's side have battled to ensure that his charges finish in a comfortable place, but the uncertainty about their existence takes a toll. It's great to see that they've replied with resounding confidence, but still, they needed an 8-0 win over Hull City to avoid relegation if the 12-point deduction came into effect. Although the 12-point deduction will come into effect next year, the players and senior staff have to be applauded for their commitment to the Latics cause. They agreed to defer part of their wages for 3 months in April, and when the time came to get paid, are looking at the club being declared insolvent. It's ironic to remember how the club had hoped Next Leader Fund's ownership would relieve them of their troubling financial issues just over a month ago. Executive Chairman Darren Royal had claimed the new owners would allow them to revive the organisation with innovative and safe ways of practice, which is something the board of directors, the senior management team and a number of staff have been planning and prioritising over the past few weeks. But if we were to look at why Our Young YK, the general partner of the Next Leader Fund, failed to uphold his promises, you'll see that he spent £40 million to purchase the club but had to get out of the deal. The reason is simple. Championship and lower tier clubs depend on matchday revenues for sustenance. In the aftermath of this pandemic, that source of income had completely dried up. They will have to wait for that stream to revive, but in the short term, fund it themselves. This is not an easy undertaking, and one has to applaud them for being this straightforward. Wigan's administration has caused quite a stir, but it would have been worse had the club gone under. Their rich history would have become folklore. However, it's also raised quite a few questions. The EFL has to become more vigilant in its ratifications of new owners. The UEFA model of funds commitment should be applied, as it will ensure that the clubs are not taken advantage of. But even if they don't, there should be guarantees and sanctions in place that affect the owners and not the club. The administrators agree that the club was run in a prudent manner, but the financial ramifications of the pandemic have been too severe for the club to handle. Wigan were fortunate that points deductions will come into effect next season, but they will be fighting a cause with odds stacked against them.